Well, here we are in part 3 of our series about how to make healthy, life-giving change. Perhaps you've experienced a disconnect or a tension between the proclamation that I made at the end of part 2 and what's happened when you tried to change. At the end of part 2, I said, truly healthy and life-giving change isn't just possible, it's guaranteed if I cooperate with God. And yet, perhaps your experience is like mine. My experience seems to be more failure than a success when trying to make healthy, long-term, life-giving change. All right? I've experienced that dynamic. I've experienced the tension between what I said in that sermon and what I think I felt in my life. During one extended period of time, I refused to make any goals because I was absolutely convinced, I wasn't going to achieve them anyways. I wasn't going to get there. I wasn't going to be able to make those changes. So why bother even plan? Why bother even set any goals in the first place? Maybe change feels impossible for you. Maybe it feels impossible because it seems like as you remember it, your previous attempts all failed. Not because you jumped off the circle, like we talked about in part 1, but because you fell off the circle at some other point. Maybe you would say you've listened to a lot of advice on how to change, but the formula for change just didn't seem to work for you. You read it in a book and the author swore by it and it worked for him and his life changed, but you couldn't seem to make that same thing work for you. It's like it didn't take into account your personal wiring or something. It didn't work. Well, let's see if we can do some diagnosing and some fixing today so that we can experience healthy, life-giving change and so that God can address the needs that He sees in our lives. I want to start by just reminding ourselves of what the parts of us are. So, parts of me. We're multifaceted beings. So I have a heart. Another word for heart would be a will. That's the decision-making part of me. I have a body. That's the part of me that carries out all of my decisions and that interacts with the physical stimuli of the world. I have a mind. And when I use the word mind, I'm thinking of both my thoughts and my emotions. They take place there. And then, of course, another part of me is my social life. And by social life, I'm not talking about like how often I go out with friends. I'm not talking about my calendar. I'm talking about the people that I'm doing life with and the interplay between me and other people. All that is my social life or my social context. We could also say another part of us is our physical context. That's our physical environment, but I'm not going to get into that part today. So the parts of me are my heart, my body, my mind, which is my thoughts and my emotions, and my social life. Now, here's the punchline for today. I'm going to give it to you right up front, and then we're going to spend a lot of time unpacking it. Here it is. Healthy, life-giving change is far more likely if I try to get all the parts of me going in the same direction. Maybe it's helpful to illustrate when I've tried to make changes where the different parts were going in different directions. For example, if I decide, so that's my heart, my will, decides I'm going to lose weight, but my body is exhausted and I'm not getting enough sleep, and then I'm hanging out with people who like to go out for dessert, my will is going this direction, right, towards weight loss, but my body is not going towards weight loss, and my social life isn't going towards weight loss. They're going towards the restaurant or Dairy Queen or whatever. Right? You got the idea. Or another example where I'm going different directions. Let's say that I decide, again, engaging my will, my heart, I decide to stop losing my temper. But I mentally find myself rehearsing the ways that you've been a jerk to me. So my thoughts and my emotions, they're going the opposite direction. They're going towards keeping me in bondage to that temper. And then imagine that I'm telling those stories to a friend who always agrees with me that I deserve better than what I'm getting from you. So my social life, that's going this way. My will's going that way. You get the picture. At our in-person gathering, I'm going to divide people into small groups and have them brainstorm at least 1 or 2 examples more of a person who's attempting to make a change with their parts going in different directions, right? Will's going one way, maybe the body's going a different way, maybe the thoughts, the emotions are going the same as the body, or maybe a different way even yet, right? This is what you know. When the parts of us are going in different directions, what's the likelihood of us being able to make the change that we've settled on that we need to make? Yeah, right. Very, very, very slim to none. As opposed to, let me try to give you an illustration of a time when I worked very hard to make sure all the parts were lined up. And guys, as I tell you this story, I am not the hero. It's better for me to use examples from my life than examples from your life, perhaps. Growing up, well, I'll call it an anger problem. I got angry fairly easily, fairly intensely. And then I fell in love. And that was awesome. And it was wonderful. At the same time, it was scary because I was really in love with Mara, and I thought, oh my goodness, if I don't address this anger issue, what if it gets worse? Because I knew enough to know that problems don't usually stay the same size. They tend to either get bigger or smaller. And so I began to think, as I was pondering getting married, I'm like, what if this gets worse? What if this turns violent? Well, you're right. Could I be the kind of person who ends up being a wife beater? And so I began to be sensitive to this issue. Like, I got to address this anger problem. And I worked at it a little bit, but not wholeheartedly, you would say. I'll get to that in a moment. And then we had kids. And I don't know if you know this or not, but kids don't necessarily help you with your anger problem unless the goal is to point out how bad it is and how frequent it is. So I had kids. So now I'm even more motivated. Like, I got to be really careful what the lessons I teach to these kids. And I don't want to lose my temper and stuff like that. And so I began to get really serious about life change. And that's about the time that I began to learn what we're talking about today, that life change is far more likely if I get all the parts of me going the same direction. And so I came up with a plan to get all the parts of me addressing this anger problem. We're all going the same direction. So let me just kind of walk through it with you. First was my heart, or my will. I decided several things. I decided to agree with God that I'm sinfully responding to anger. I'm not just a victim here. I'm a guilty victim, right? And I'm sinfully responding to anger. I decided, second, to pursue the root cause rather than anger management. That was a huge decision. Like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this rather than just try to keep it contained. And I decided to cooperate with God by drafting a multifaceted plan. That was the will. 3 big decisions. My mind, which includes my thoughts and emotions. With my mind, it seemed like there was no warning. Like, I was fine, and then poof, I was angry. And so I needed to try to do something to insert a thought in that brief, second between starting to get irritated and angry. And here's the thought that I worked very hard at trying to insert into that brief split second. Here it is. The thought is, the problem here is I'm not getting what I want. See, up to that point, I was subconsciously probably thinking this. The problem here is you are, and I'm not getting what I deserve, or something like that. And so I changed it, and I worked very hard. I had it all written out ahead of time. The problem here is I'm not getting what I want. And just saying that got me to pause long enough to go, oh, this isn't all about them. Yeah, maybe the kids are misbehaving, or yeah, maybe that was a disrespectful comment, or yeah, maybe it was this or that. But just getting that one thought in there began to slow it down a little bit for me and begin to change the direction of my thoughts and my emotions. Body. Well, this is where it got big. I tried 2 things to engage my body. First was I started physical exercise to help with stress. This is one of the reasons I ride bike. Right, physical exercise to help with stress. But the second was, this was huge for me, I made a commitment to handwrite a report after every blow up, because this is engaging my body, like my hand literally. I've put a sample on the screen for you of what all went into that report, right? What I had to answer these questions. What happened that provoked me to anger? What did I say to myself in my heart when I became angry? What was it that I wanted? What was I was desiring? What was I longing for? And I had to sit there and think that through and then write the answers down. I really wanted respect, or I really just wanted obedience, or I really just wanted them. I really just didn't want to have to deal with that, or whatever. Third question, what does the Bible say about what I said to myself when I was angry? And what did I say or do while angry? And what was the biblical evaluation of what I said and did while I was angry? What should I have said to myself and wanted more than my own desires when I was becoming angry? And what should I have said and what should I have done when I became angry? And then I had a space for other, like any other thoughts or whatever. And I would sit there and I would write this out. And guys, this was not fast for me because I had to get in touch with what was really going on in my heart, right? And I had to write it out and stuff. So this is usually about a 30-minute exercise, sometimes longer. But I was engaging my body, like physically doing something about my anger. And this is where, frankly, the first big breakthrough came. One day, I don't remember what the issue is. I just remember how it turned out. One day, I was irritated, and I was about ready to just get very angry and potentially lose it. And all of a sudden, this thought hit me. If I get angry, I'm going to have to fill out that stupid form. Because I didn't like it. I did not like spending a half an hour to an hour filling out the form. And so all of a sudden, it's like, poof, I'm about ready to lose it. And that thought hits my head. If you get angry, you're going to have to fill out the form. And I'm like, whoa. I don't have to fill out the form. So I didn't lose it. I'm like, whoa, that was a breakthrough moment for me because all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, I can control this. I always thought it was completely unable to be controlled. It was beyond my ability. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just didn't lose my temper solely so that I didn't have to fill out the form. My social aspect, my social life, I also got engaged in this. I made a commitment to confess my failure freely to my one friend and also to tell him what I was discovering about my desires as I would do those reports, what patterns were there. And also I had made a commitment to seek to make it right to those who were affected whenever I could. Now, again, I'm not the hero of the story. What I'm trying to show you, though, is what a multifaceted plan could look like. It tries to get the heart, the will, our decisions, and our emotions, our thoughts, and our body and our social life all engaged in making that one major change. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if you're getting that much of you all going the same direction, you're likely to actually go in that direction, right? Change is far, far, far more probable if that's the case. So there it is. Healthy, life-giving change is far more likely if I get all the parts of me going the same direction. Friends, how many parts do we usually engage when trying to make a change? I think for a lot of us, one. Which part? Our heart, our will, right? We call it willpower. Like, I want to change this. And how does that turn out? Not so good, right? Now, I'm not sure what your reaction to this is. Mine, when I first got this idea, read about, multifaceted approach to life change, mine was a mix of a few things. It was like, well, this is obvious. Right? Of course, if you've got 4 or 5 parts of you and only one's going this direction and the other 3 are going a different direction, of course you're not going to go where you want to go. So part of me is like, well, that's obvious. There was another part of me that was like, well, that explains a lot. See, because I had always figured that the problem was either that I wasn't sincere enough in my desire to change, or maybe my commitment to change wasn't, I must not have been sincere enough previously. But that led to a huge problem. Like, how do I know I'm sincere this time? Right? Or I also thought, well, maybe the problem is I'm a person with below average willpower. And so everybody else can change, but I can't because I don't have enough willpower. And what I've now realized, it wasn't that I was deficient in willpower. It was that I was trying to go in different directions at the same time. So you could summarize what we're saying today with this phrase. Instead of trying to get your ducks in a row, get your parts lined up, right? By the way, this is why spiritual disciplines have been helpful to so many people, because spiritual disciplines usually engage multiple parts, thoughts, emotions, and body, and then get them all going in the same direction. And of course, they give expression to our desire for more of God in our life, and so God often reaches us during that desire. This thing that we're talking about, a multifaceted model of life change, right? getting all the parts of us go in the same direction. Scriptures teach that. If you have a Bible handy, I encourage you to look up the following text so that you can see each phrase when I talk about it in just a moment. The first text is Romans chapter 12, a familiar text to many people. Romans 12, verse 1. It reads this way: "Therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true worship. Don't be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is good, pleasing, and perfect will of God." And then he continues, but I want to stop right there for a moment. In Romans 12, you see a multifaceted model of life change. You see a decision of the will. It's right there at the very beginning. Verse 1, first part. The decision of the will is to live in response to God's grace and mercy. And in the buried in between the lines is the idea as well, a decision to cooperate fully with the work that God is doing. You also see a discipline of the body. This was the second half of verse 1, right? To offer each part of our body as a living sacrifice to God, our hands, our mouth, our ears, our eyes, right? To say, I'm going to use this part, God, my mouth, my thoughts. I'm going to use my ability to do things physically. I'm going to use each aspect of my body to do what you want done. That's a living sacrifice. You saw at the beginning of verse 2, the renewal of the mind. He says, don't be conformed, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. There's going to be some intentional thinking that takes place. And that intentional thinking is going to engage the thoughts and the emotions. And that's going to result in change from the inside out rather than pressure resulting in change from the outside in. So transformation instead of being conformed. And then in verses 3 to 16, which we didn't read, those verses are all about participation in Christian community. So in like verses 3 to 5, if you look at those, they're all about seeing ourselves accurately in regard to the rest of the body, the rest of the Christian community. And then in verses 6 to 8 is about how we should play our role to the best of our supernatural ability to help each other. And then in verses 9 to 16 are about how we can help each other replace evil with good. But 3 to 16 are all about how we are going to engage our social context, our social life in Christian community so that we can change. So that's Romans 12. There's another passage that's very famous, talks about life change, is Colossians chapter 3. This passage contains the famous put off, put on principle that a lot of Christian writers who talk about change, they go to Colossians 3. Let me show you this multifaceted model here too. Colossians 3, beginning at verse 1. So if you've been raised with Christ, seek the things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things, for you've died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Verse 5, therefore put to death whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desire, greed, which is idolatry. And then for sake of time, I'm going to jump down to verse 14. Above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity, and let the peace of Christ, to which you were also called in one body, rule your hearts, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell richly among you in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another through psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. There was a decision of the will in verses 1 to 4. That decision was to live out your new status. As you read through that text carefully, you'll see you've got a new status and a new future. So your decision is to live that out. Don't live the old way, right? Decide to live out your new status, new future. There's the discipline of the body in verses 5 through the first half of verse 10. He talks about put to death, that's the phrase he uses, the old self by replacing old practices with new ones. We're going to discipline our body. And then you heard the renewal of the mind was mentioned there. That was in verse 2, verse 3, verse 10, verse 16. Intentional thinking that's going to engage the thoughts and lead the emotions. And then participation in Christian community. That was verses 11 to 16, where he says, see Christ in each other. And be long-suffering and forgiving. In other words, stay connected to each other. Do what you have to do in order to stay connected and to love each other. And then he ends with this admonition to worship together and to edify each other. Help each other in this thing. So multifaceted approach to life change. Let's put some things together then from the first 3 parts of this series. Thing 1. Change starts with God. That was part 1. Change starts with God, and it also starts with a decision of the will. That's where we got today. By the way, that's why God gave us a new heart, right? If the heart's going to start this process off from our side, then we need a good heart. But number 2, change is aided by intentional, personalized alignment. That's what we've been talking about, just not in those words. Intentional, personalized alignment. Intentional. In other words, there's going to be a plan. And there's going to be a plan that takes all your parts into account, as opposed to just a wish that things were better, right? Or just relying on willpower. There's going to be a plan that takes all your parts into account. It's going to be a personalized plan. It's going to be designed to fit your personality, your learning style, your connect with God style, right? We connect with God differently. Some of us connect best with God through nature. That's why we go out for long walks, or, maybe we love to sit in the woods during hunting or something like that. Others of us, man, we connect with God way better intellectually. And so we read and we meditate and study, theology, stuff like that. Others of us, it's music is how we connect best with. You got the idea. This personalized is going to be designed to fit your personality, your learning style, your how you connect with God's style, all those things. So here's what I'm saying. We all have the same parts, right? We all have a will. We all have a body. We all have a mind. We all have a social life. But we have very different personalities and learning styles and histories, so we've got to personalize it. In other words, I'll go a little farther with this. The spiritual disciplines you use to engage your body for the change that you're trying to make will probably be different than the ones that work for me. There are certain disciplines that are just very effective at either slowing me down or helping me get my attention to God, or calling to my attention, like the ways that I am craving something other than God. The disciplines that work well for me may not be the same ones that work well for you, or not for the change that you're trying to make. The techniques that help you think the right thoughts and that lead your feelings may be different than the ones that work well for me. For me, safe thoughts, so I've talked about that in the past, safe thoughts work great for me, and perspective revision while riding bike works really well for me. Perspective revision. While I'm riding bike, if I've just had something happen, maybe at work, and I tend to do my exercise right after I get home from work, before supper, for this very reason. Maybe something happened at work, and I'm fussing about it, or it's weighing heavily on me, or whatever. And so while riding bike, and I have nothing else to do, I'll just say to God, God, this is what I'm thinking about this. And I'll tell him, this is how I feel about it, this is what I'm thinking about it. And I don't know if that's the best thing for me to be thinking. So that's my perspective. Let's go ahead and replace that with your perspective. What's your perspective on this situation? And that seems to happen while I've got about an hour and I'm being physical and releasing some stress and all that. That works really well for me. That may not work well for you. Maybe music is more effective at helping you think the right thoughts and lead your emotions. I have a daughter that works for her. Both of us, you and I, we're going to require engaging our social connections, right? But that too may look different. Some of us respond best when we are held strictly accountable, while some do better when it's more, shall we say, cheering from others, but less accountability. Some of us do better when we're making the change with others who are making exactly the same change. And so a support group works great for them. Whereas for others, as long as I've got some supportive friends, we can all be working on different things. Some people grow better with goal setting, while others grow better trying to solve problems. And focus on solving a problem rather than on setting a goal. Some work really great with small groups, while others with triads, and some others, for them, it's best if it's one-on-one with a counselor or a coach. But what we all have in common is we need to engage our social life if we want to make that change. So, talked about it's intentional, it's personalized, it's alignment. All the parts are going in the same direction. What we're saying today is, I hope, encouraging to you. Intentional, personalized alignment greatly increases the probability of change, while also giving us freedom to have to do it exactly the same way that the preacher or the author or the trainer or the friend or the coach said, right? You get to personalize it based on your makeup and the way God has made you. All right, let's bring this to a close. As we've been doing in this series, let's talk about what know, feel, and do. What I'm wanting to know, what I want to remember this week is that change is far more likely if I try to get all the parts of me going the same direction. What I am feeling, and I'm hoping you're feeling as well as this, two things. One, hopeful. Because there really is good reason for hope, and hope will help me to do the hard work that this is going to require. But so hopeful, but also a sense of freedom, because I can personalize a plan to fit the way that I am wired, the way that God made me. Do. What I need to do, what I'm hoping you'll do, is discern what would intentional, personalized alignment look like for you regarding the change that you believe God wants you to make. As you think about that, maybe you need to talk it over with a friend. Maybe you just need to spend some time praying with God. How do I get all the parts of me go in the same direction on this thing that you're talking to me, this change I need to make? How do I get all the parts of me cooperating with you and with each other on that path? That's what I mean by intentional, personalized alignment. I hope this is helpful. I look forward to seeing you in part 4.